So it's a new day, we've even got a new curtain to lie down on, and it's now time to offer up this axle beam to the car. The axle beam is supported on a couple of wheels, and we've got new bolts and nuts. We need to start by mounting this side, the right hand side, because we want the left hand end to be as free as possible to allow us to move this bracket. It's hard to explain, but we need as much movement on this bracket as possible, so this side needs to be done first. We want to get this bracket as far over as possible to maximise the clearance between here and the fuel tank to get that bolt in. Okay, after much jiggling around, we've cleared this space, and it's through the first part of this bush, and that has just pushed through, which is great. Time to get the nut and the washer on there, get the other side mounted, and then I'm going to rebolt this bracket. I'm not going to fully tighten these until the other side is in place, just for alignment purposes. I'll fully tighten those in a bit when the other side's mounted. Okay, wiggle it. That's it, that's partially in. Keep going with the jack. It's almost lining up. So both sides are now actually mounted. Just need to tighten these up and then tighten up the bracket on the other side. These swinging arm bolts are done up on both sides, but not fully, because we'll do that when the vehicle's on the ground at its natural ride height. New springs here, and the beauty of the rear springs is that on this car, this particular arrangement, you don't have to compress them, you just lower the rear axle and these springs can be removed. The spring is marked with top, which is here, and just comparing old with new, we can see that this is the same. This top rubber mounting here is known as the thrust washer. That just needs to be fitted with this butting up against here. That is now seated in there, up to there, and there are some little securing tabs. This is the new bump stop, despite it looking like something very different, and this simply push fits here. Push and twist, and that's in there. The lower spring cup area, which is the bit that's most prone to the corrosion, as you saw on the old axle beam, has a little locating piece here, a ridge, and that's where the edge of this rests against. I'm going to set up the other one so that we've got both of them ready, so we lift the axle and both are then in place at the same time. We are now in a position to fit these springs. It's going to involve one of us being each side of the car, and it's also going to involve fitting a shock absorber once these are fitted to keep the axle in position. I'm just going to prime these shock absorbers. It allows them to explore their full range of motion, and if they are filled with fluid as opposed to gas, providing this is done in vertical position, it allows everything to settle where it needs to be inside. It's very old school. I've never seen any younger colleagues do this in the car trade, but the old boys always did. Tighten these 15mm bolts, but not fully. As I said, all final tightening is done when the vehicle has its weight on it. Tighten the other side, again not fully, but just enough to secure it in place. Are you almost ready to be jacked up?
Yep.
Yeah, me too. Alright, hang on. Carry on. Now, what should have been a really simple case of fixing this lower rear shock mounting turned out to be more difficult, because the way this had been manufactured, with this hole here, the bolt was at a slight angle and was at great danger of cross-threading. I had to actually file down a little bit lower here to enable this to go in straight and not cross-thread. You don't really expect to have to modify a component when you buy it, but it just goes to show that the tolerances might not be as good as the original. Bottom bolt is tightened but not fully, likewise with the top. And in stark contrast to the other side, this just fits easily in there. There's even a gap, and the bolt slots in easily and is easy to get started. What a difference. Again, it's tightened but not fully, and the same top mount. At this point, I'm going to reconnect the wiring on the near side for the ABS speed sensor, also the brake line and the handbrake cable. It's worth noting that the handbrake cable on the near side is slightly shorter than the offside. It's 25mm shorter. Alright, I'm just refitting this ABS sensor wiring into this bracket. Reconnecting that and refitting this bracket into the body here. Reconnect this brake pipe. I'm aware that the angle of this isn't perfect. If we get that started first, we can then position this pipe correctly, which will help create the routing, if that makes sense. If I just tighten that, we can now get the clip in here, and just some further tightening to this. The handbrake cable is snapped into position like that. It will be reconnected inside the car in just a moment. It is then fitted in this guide here. This is located into here. That seats in there. Now these are the little devils that were impossible to remove without destroying. We managed to pick up a couple of these this morning at a Fiat dealer. For those that are interested, that's the part number. So with this snapped into place, we can now fit this cable, and this should lock the cable into position so effectively that it cannot be removed without destroying the clip. So the ABS wiring is connected and routed, the hydraulics, as in the pipe, connected, secured in place with the clips, and the handbrake cable is fitted. Now time to build up the brake shoe assemblies. We've got new springs and also a fixing kit, the springs, cups and pins. The only thing we're going to have to reuse is the adjuster and that little spring there. So let's take this apart. We've got that new spring, and it's now a case of backing this off, which I'll do now. This adjuster fixes just above that little raised nipple bit there, with a spring like that. This spring is fitted in here. This little adjuster spring goes into the second hole there, and we refit the lower spring. That is ready to go back on the car. Right hand side, repeat the same. Flip it over, remove the spring there for the tensioner on the back. Again, wind in the adjuster. You can either wind it in like this, or you can pull these back and turn the serrated wheel. And that is the correct setup for the right hand side. So next we need to connect this handbrake cable to this arm on the brake shoe. I use a pair of pliers just to hold that back. Note the copper slip applied to the brake backplates where the brake shoes make contact. So we need to get this handbrake cable back onto this lever here on the brake shoe, which we do like that. And then squeeze in these wheel cylinders and position the brake shoes. It's then a case of fixing these in position with the pins, springs and cups. And there we go. Let's tighten this a little initially. It is now time to refit the wheel bearing, the new wheel bearing. We've got a kit here with all the necessary parts to do the job. That washer has to go on there first. Refit the thrust washer and a new 32mm lock nut. This has to be tightened to 188 Newton meters. Again, as I said earlier, that's by my own research. Always do your own research before you select a torque setting. Don't base it on what I say. And the same on this side. Some nice shiny new brake drums. Just need to degrease these so we don't contaminate the new brake linings. Brake discs and brake drums usually come with some sort of oil-based preservative to protect them in transit. And it's important that we wipe this off. This just makes it easier to take the brake drums off for service. Bit of copper slip. The self-adjusters will take care of the adjusters by themselves, as their name would suggest, and I will explain that later. Just going to hook up this brake bleeder. This uses a spare tyre to provide pressure to this container, which then in turn forces it into the brake reservoir, and then we'd simply open up each bleed screw in turn and bleed out each wheel. The tyre used to pressurise the reservoir must not have more than 20 psi. Mustn't forget to undo these clamps on the flexi hoses. Pretty murky stuff. So I've refilled the reservoir on the brake bleeder, and I've now pressurised the system. I'm now going to release the clamp on the other side and then bleed out the offside rear. So that's about another half a litre that we've pulled out through this offside rear. Again, pretty murky but clean now. I'll tighten this up now. The brakes are all bled, so now it really is a case of pressing the brake pedal repeatedly to get these auto adjusters to adjust to their correct place. You can hear the clicking as that little knurled wheel is pushed round with each brake application, and the same on the other side. That's the auto adjuster doing its job. So once again we are running out of daylight at this point, but everything is back together. Welcome to the retightening phase. We have a few things to retighten when the vehicle is on the ground and under its own weight. We've got the pivot point for the axle beam here, each side. We've got the upper suspension mount, and we've got the lower suspension mount, and also the bracket underneath. We're now going to get the wheels on and take it off the axle stands. Final tightening of the axle beam pivot point each side. Lower shock absorber bolts tightened on both sides. These will be torqued up afterwards. And the upper shock absorber mounts. Top shock absorber mounting, I'm torquing to 70 Newton meters. As I always say, do your own research for your torque settings. Just refitting these under trays. The bracket was also tightened. Following a decent road test, and once the rear brakes had started to bed in and the auto adjusters done their work, we could then adjust the handbrake on the inside of the vehicle. The job is finally done. I'm not going to lie, that was hard work on the driveway. It would have been a whole lot easier on a ramp in the workshop, but we've got what we've got. I've advised the driver of the car, my friend, that he should take this for a wheel alignment check, as in the case of any suspension work that you have done, it's always a good idea to have a full wheel alignment check done afterwards, although from what I've read they're not adjustable at the rear on these anyway. Although I find that a little hard to believe, because there is definitely movement in those brackets at the back. I hope you enjoyed the video. There's more to come on this car, including a thermostat, front lower suspension arms, and also a full service, although I think I've already done a full service video on this car a while back. Please do feel free to like and subscribe, as I always say, and if this video has been helpful to you, there is always the option to buy me a coffee, link in the description. Any kind donations do get fed back into the channel to help pay for tools and equipment. Thank you and goodbye.